Hello? Last time we read the first part of Chapter 9 with Dr. Bashir and Ro reacting to the aftermath of the Jem'Hadar attack on the station. And so now we'll get back into it with Kira, I believe. Let's start. There was more than enough room in the cargo bay for the coffins and urns and memorial plaques, but it was no less crowded for the dark and cavernous space. She'd left the main bank of lights off, the barely lit shadows much more appropriate for her lonely visit, and somehow it reinforced the vague feeling that she'd never seen so many of the dead in one place. It wasn't true, of course, but the blank rows and stacks of sealed containers seemed to go on forever as they disappeared into the dark, an endless testimony to all that had gone wrong only a single day ago, and to her own place within that series of events that had left almost 70 of her people dead. The memorial service had gone well, she supposed, as if any such thing could be said to describe a few simple prayers and a shocked moment of silent remembrance. It would have been better to wait a few days, but Kira knew from experience that reality assimilation often took time, which was an uncertain variable until they knew exactly why the Jem'Hadar had attacked the station. Better to say a few words when there was an opportunity to say them, and hope that the survivors could manage their own personal closure in the days to come. The service itself had been brief, the promenade overflowing, but still. Everyone who could leave their work for a few moments standing en masse, like a tide of lifeless dolls, watching her speak with flat and barely responsive gazes. After staying up all night walking the damaged station and personally taking reports from every section and subsection chief she could find, standing in front of the mostly silent assembly had seemed unreal, a disjointed dream filled with realistically unhappy details. The pale faces of the Aldebaran crew, knowing that only an assigned leave had spared them while their friends had died. The way Nog's proudly raised chin had trembled, or the soft sigh of an elderly woman who had lost her son. Kira had heard tears and seen the hard, set lines of faces that reflected emptiness, for fear that even acknowledging the pain would be too much to bear. Kira rested her hand on the cool, smooth surface of a keepsake box, destined for a family in the Hedrickspool province of Bajor. A few personal items that their daughter had left behind. Setrin Yetta, one of Ro's junior deputies, a bubbly red-headed girl with a high-pitched laugh. Gone. To be with the prophets, surely, but would her family feel any less pain? Will any of us? Tyrus and Turo-Ann, Kelly and Elvam and McEwen and Tepang and Graham, and the list went on, some of the faces only known in passing. All of them real people with real lives, and if she had only done something more, if she'd made a decision a few seconds earlier or later. Without consciously deciding to, she had gone straight from the ceremony to the cargo bay, almost as if guided by some invisible hand. Even with all there was to do, her sense of responsibility wouldn't allow her to avoid it. To understand what had happened, to really understand what had been lost, she needed to see them, to witness the reality of them. As she'd stepped into the bay, her early morning dream from the day before had come back to her from what seemed to be millennia ago. It was the environment that did it, bringing a flash of imagery, a cargo bay, and she's been surrounded by dying people on the Cardassian freighter. The fleeting glimpse of Ben as she'd walked into the light of the prophets. Had it been an omen, even a warning? Had she been too quick to dismiss it as a dream? Now, she was surrounded by the dead, but she knew that there would be no saving grace at the end, no friendly voice or affirmation of divinity. She wasn't going to wake up, and though she'd been responsible for the death of others in her time, there was no real way to prepare for it or work out moral rationalizations. It would always be something so vast and shocking that there was little to be done but to weather it, to let it be. There wasn't anything that could make her less responsible. Better to accept the consequences and move on than to waste time wishing things were otherwise. She walked slowly between two of the rows, letting her finger slip across the various containers of nondescript black metal, hurriedly replicated that afternoon. She'd had some vague idea about looking for Tyrus to say goodbye, but she couldn't simply walk past the others. She thought the Jas probably would have understood. Here were two humans bound for home, two Federation diplomatic trainees, both male, bright, fresh from the academy, and excited to study in the field, observing Cardassian aid relations. During his first day on the station, the older of the two had actually tried to flirt with her. He obviously hadn't yet learned how to read Bajoran rank insignia, and flashed a grin that told her that her eyes burned like the stars. She'd actually considered not telling him her name when he had asked, amused and secretly flattered by the ignorant attempt. In the end, she'd been unable to resist. The young man had blushed furiously and then studiously avoided her, right up until the day he died. Eric, and his friend was Martin. She touched the black lines of code at the heads of their containers, wondering what Asgard and New Paris were like, the places where their families unknowingly waited for notification. Next to them, a small sealed pouch of liquid that would be sent to Meldrar 1, blood from Starfleet Ensign Jekatrat's heart that would be poured into the Meldrar Sea by its siblings. Jetaquat had challenged her to a game of spring ball not so long ago, a date they would never keep. Kira walked on. A row away, a long line of various ceremonial urns bound for various Bajoran cities and townships, some containing earrings, the symbols of family, of the victims' devotion to the prophets, and the spiritual community to which they belonged, others with small pieces from the lives that had been taken. She sighed, her mind so full of mass recriminations that she didn't want to think, not because she feared the pain, because it was too distracting. Balancing between remorse and the cold, linear reality of the future was a cruel and terrible thing. She couldn't even allow herself the questionable relief of wallowing in guilt, because the station needed her. It needed her to be at the top of her game, and she couldn't afford to shoulder the presumption of incompetence, no matter how much she thought she should. "Why did you come here, Rayla?" Kara said softly, her voice almost lost in the soft hum of the air coolers. She wasn't sure if it was a question, wasn't sure what she expected, but the death of her long-ago friend meant something. It had to mean something, didn't it? All of this had to mean something. Kira felt her throat constrict and took several deep breaths, inhaling and exhaling heavily, clearing her mind. With each new breath, the tide of sorrow crept back, giving her room, reminding her that she was whole and alive and had a lot to do, too much to be standing around weeping in the dark. Just as she felt herself reaching safer ground, her combat badge signaled. "Colonel Kira, there's an incoming message from Bajor, routed from the USS Cerberus, Ross's ship. Should I send it to your office?" It was Bowers in Ops, and he sounded tense. Everyone on the station understood that Admiral Ross's call would set them on a definite course of action, to comply with whatever the Federation decided. What that course would be, Kira wasn't certain. At one time, she would have called for immediate action, but she wasn't so quick to assume the worst as she used to be. And not so quick to fight if there's even a possible alternative. As far as she was concerned, the attack should be quietly investigated through diplomatic channels, at least until something solid turned up. And although Kira believed that the Federation wouldn't act rashly, they probably wouldn't even whisper the idea of a counterattack before careful consideration, she wasn't positive. That was bad. But what really scared her was the possibility that she wouldn't have any way to influence their decision if they had, in fact, decided on some sort of retaliatory action. Deep Space Nine sat at the Alpha entrance to the wormhole, the first outpost that any Gamma traveler or soldier would encounter. Without question, the Dominion could not be allowed back, not if they meant to fight. But how could she allow one more life to be lost when she might be able to prevent it? "My job here isn't about me, and it's not just about the state of the Federation. It's also about trying to do what's best for the people on the station and for Bajor." She believed that, and it gave her strength. It was direction when she needed it. But as Bowers waited for her response, she gazed out over the sad remains of her friends, of her wards and peers, and the semi-remembered faces of just a few of the thousands who depended on her. And she didn't feel it. "I'll be as strong as I need to be." "Yes, I'm on my way," Kira said, gathering her defenses as she turned toward the doors that would lead her back to the world of the living. She didn't hurry, and she didn't look back, the possibility of tears already a memory. That finishes Chapter 9. So, there are a couple things that strike me about this chapter. It's kind of a, I don't know the right word, a counter to the red shirt phenomena, where if they're not, well, anyone who's watching this knows what red shirts are, but this is showing that those people mattered, even the ones who don't have names. The crew doesn't just wave those deaths off and move on. That is important within that world, which I think is a very good thing. I'm very glad that the author, S.D. Perry, took time to have that in the story. Deep Space Nine was pretty good about this. I remember one episode, I believe it was the ship, where they are trapped in the Jem'Hadar ship for most of the episode, with Dominion soldiers trying to get rid of them. Where the end scene where Sisko names all the crew members who died. So I feel like that's kind of a thematic continuation of that. And also Kira here, she's holding up well professionally, but you could see that this is something's got to give soon. She blames herself. She feels the weight of this responsibility. She's grieving, or more accurately, I suppose she's pushing away her grief because she thinks there's no time, and she might be right about that. So something's got to give, even if she's holding up at the moment. It also, that mention of Rayla keeps that thread alive. In the, I could call it a subplot, but it's reminding us, the readers, that that's still a thing. So I really admire the writing, the craft that goes into this book. I'm not sure what else to say. Next time we'll go. Oh, it also mentions Kira's dream, which, even if I didn't know what happened, I would assume was significant. First, because you shouldn't describe a main character's dream if it's not significant, and then a reminder to keep that in the reader's mind. So that's good writing as well. It's rather interesting, I think. One piece of conventional writing advice is never open with a dream. And this book kind of did. Not really. It's the prologue with Jake thinking about his dream. It didn't open with him actually dreaming. But then I believe the first chapter with Kira had her dreaming of the Cardassian freighter. And I think this works. Thought it worked. Because this is dreams or orb experiences. Hi, Sam. He wants to play. This is Giant Bone. Here. Anyway, dreams and orb experiences are part of the DS9 fabric. And Kira has had orb visions before. So there's that significance about it. And also, I guess you could say it's foreshadowing, but I won't. That thought just occurred to me. I won't spoil the story further. So, next time we'll start chapter 10. Until then.